Welcome back, YouTuber. Here we are on part 3 of our advanced PDO project. I've changed the title a little bit so that it's not specific to the class, because I wanted to extend that PDO to another class, to another lesson, so that we can leverage from this classes that we just created. Okay, so what we're going to be doing is two things: create the user table in our SQL database panel, and create the user class that will use the PDO connection we created. Okay, so first thing first is to create I'm sorry, I'm babbling up my word here. It's pretty late at night, and so we're having a little bit of lag. Okay. All right, so let's create our user class, user table. Users, probably gonna have 8 columns. And we're gonna have first column is user ID, integer value, primary, auto increment, first name, varchar 40, last name, varchar 40. No, we are not trying to do that. This thing is crapping out. I'm sorry. Let me start that again. Users 8. Okay, we only need 7. And the first one is again user ID, primary, and auto increment. Our second field is first name, last name, email, phone, password, activated. This is auto increment. This is varchar. Most of them are varchar. Leave the phone number. Activated would be enum. Enum 0, 1. So we have an on and off. Then with the defined value of 0 as our default value. Then 40 here. 40, 40, 40, and 40. Okay, and let's go ahead and save this. And there goes our users with 7 fields. Okay, so that's done. Now let's create the managed user class. Okay, save it. Now we're gonna save it in the classes directory. As you notice, I've already created one there. But I think that's from my demo earlier that was not recorded. So what we're gonna do is create another class. Disregard that one there. Show you. We'll just probably call this users. Save, and there you go. So the first thing we want to do is include the file that we need, and that's config and a config PDO connection PHP. Okay, notice that this is the PDO connection that we're requiring when we instantiate the user. Right, we need it to extend this abstract class. Remember, it's abstract and protected, so we need to extend that class. So we could do that by creating a class of users extends connection. That's about right. Connection, yeah. Okay. Now, first thing we want to do is to because this is an abstract and it's got a constructor here. When you extend a class, you have to call its constructor because you're not creating an object out of it, right? So we're gonna do that by creating a constructor of this class, the user class, and call in the parent constructor. That's how you call the constructor. Okay. Right, so that's done. Now I've already created this earlier. Make this thing a lot faster. There we go. Okay, so let me just explain this really quick. So we created a function called create, and we're passing 5 parameters: first name, last name, email, phone number, and the password. And then we are creating the SQL insert string for our method RunQuery. We store that in the SQL variable, and inputs would be the values of what we're passing. Notice that we're using the question mark here, and we're telling it to, because this is a parameterized query, so that's how you would do this. You could use it, you could do names, but it makes it a lot easier to do it this way, so that when you need to add fields to your database, you can easily add here, and without, and the values, without having to worry about the naming convention. Okay, so yeah, that's the input, and this is SQL, and then remember this RunQuery is the method that we created here. Okay, and then we're just passing the SQL and the inputs to it, and then you know that the PDO connection returns a SQL statement, right there, PDO statement, sorry, and what we're doing is literally just storing it again to another variable called a statement, so that we can get the affected row count with the inserted one, and we're returning the row count. Okay, that's how you create the method for the user, the first method to create the user in under users. Now we're gonna have to use this, right? Okay, so so let's go ahead and create another class here. Function get user. Let's change this to create user, or add user, and then get user. we'll get the user by its ID. Okay. Okay, and we probably don't want this being public. Make it private. You'll see later on why. Okay, and in this get user, we're just simply gonna construct our SQL statement again. So select all from users where ID is equals to that, or we can call it user ID, just like that. Okay. But yeah, you could do it that way. And then the inputs, again, when you use the named parameter, you have to pass an associative array like this, user ID, like that. Okay, or otherwise it won't work. Okay, now let's again get a statement. This RunQuery SQL inputs. That's it. Now, because we are using select statement, you expect the query to return an array. So that's pretty much how you do it. But first, before we fetch the result, we need to check if there's a matching if there's a matching record. So the way we do that is, again, it's the same as the row count here. I'm just gonna copy this, just like that, and we can then go if row count is greater than 0. That means we have a result, and we can then return and fetch that result by saying return statement fetch all PDO. We want to return an associative array, so you do that by fetching the associative array as I believe fetch a sock, something like that. Yeah, that should do it. Else we return row count. It will return 0. Okay, now this is private, so now we need to also create a another private function. You know what, I'm gonna make this public because I think we're gonna use this later on as well. Public function get user info, and we're gonna pass email and just email, and password. Okay, what the class will do is we're gonna check if the user I think let's wait a second here, just bear with me here. We could do it this way, or yeah, this will just get the user information if the user exists in the database. So we could do it like this way. Again, select all from users where email is equals to that and password equals to that. Again, our inputs. Hopefully you're seeing the trend here, the why we created the RunQuery method because of this, so we don't have to keep going through this if statement, right? We want to pass email, password. Okay, and this RunQuery SQL inputs. Again, there's a statement. This is becoming repetitive, so I mean you could even make this simpler by creating another class that does all of this and create like a switch statement that could determine what type of query you're trying to do. So if you're trying to do an insert, you could then create an enumerated or another class that defines or define a constant value that literally holds the type of query. And then you could iterate through that using the switch statement. But for the sake of simplicity, we're doing it this way. Okay, so there you go. Get user info. We're checking if the email and the password provided by the user matches the one in the database. Okay, so if it does, again, row count, stmt row count. If row count is greater than 0, return true. Else, return false. Okay, so what we're doing here is we're checking if the user exists. If it does, then return true. If it doesn't exist, return false. Okay. Yeah, and we could use this method here to check if user exists in the database when you're creating a new user. You could also check this, use this function for your login. So this is like a multi-function or method, purpose method here. And then the get user by ID is once the user is authenticated using this, you can then, because this one here does not return any values really, right? Actually, instead of doing that, let's just get the user ID. Okay, and yeah, just do user ID. So we're not really selecting all of the values in the field, just the ID, right? I mean, later on you could store that into a variable. So once it's authenticated, you can then call the private function to return that value instead. In fact, that's what we're gonna do now. We're probably just gonna do that. So the way you do this is to get the user ID, you would run the statement, and since we're only returning, you're only gonna get one. You could do fetch all, or you can just do fetch, and that would return just this one here. But again, this one will return an array of values. So we could go fetch the first one. I think it's like that. Not sure. You probably also need to do this. let's comment this out. We'll deal with that later. Let's return true for now, or we could return the statement so that we can check later on. Okay. All right. So I think that covers the user class. We got get user, we got add user, we have get user info when you want to log in your user. Later on, we're gonna create the class for updating the user info. That's definitely a different ball game, but we can create a class that will dynamically select the number of inputs, like automatically determine the number of inputs so that you don't have to know which fields you're updating. We could do that, or we could do it this way, right? So all right, that's it for now. Let's on the next video, part 4, we're gonna use this class to add a user, get the user info, and get the details of the user. All right, see you in part 4.